So today we're going to look at the dash. It is a punctuation mark that's often not talked about, but it is one that can be very useful in any kind of writing. So we need to talk about three things. The first thing that we need to talk about is what is a dash. A dash is formed by putting two hyphens together, and those are the smaller little marks that you see. And when you put two hyphens together a lot of times in the word processor, it'll make a longer dash. The dash is also known as the em dash. There are no spaces within or around the dash, and I will show you some examples of that on the next page. So, as you can see, the dash kind of sets things apart. So I really can't stand Jane, Larry, and Maria, for instance, when people show up and don't help out. So as you'll notice, now the word processor has created the longer dash instead of two smaller hyphens, and there's no space in between the first part of the sentence and the dash and then the phrase in between. Now we have to talk about kind of what does it do, right? So the dash can be useful when you want to emphasize something in the middle of a sentence. So you want to think of a dash as almost a scream, like, hey, look at me, pay attention to this. Dashes are used to draw attention to a particular clause, phrase, or list in the middle or at the end of a sentence. So anything that comes in the middle that you want to draw attention to, or anything that comes at the end that you want to draw attention to. So I'll go back to the examples, and you can see that first one, we're really trying to emphasize that Jane, Larry, and Maria, for instance, are the people that we can't stand because they show up and don't help out. The next example kind of shows at the end of the sentence where you can plug in a dash. I knew my mom would be angry, but not that angry. So it kind of draws emphasis to the fact that you thought she would be angry, but you didn't realize she was going to be that angry. So now we're trying to get the reader to pay attention to what comes after or in between the dashes. So the best way I can kind of get you to understand how dashes work is they work quite like parentheses. So in writing, when you're reading something and you come across something in parentheses, you usually think of it as, okay, I can read this, it gives me extra information, but it doesn't really do anything else than that. It's just telling me other things on the subject. Dashes are the ones that scream at you. So you can put information in between parentheses, and it means more or less you don't have to pay attention to this. This is just extra. But dashes are saying, hey, look at this. This is important. You have to pay attention to this. This is extremely important. So they're jumping out at you. It's something that the writer wants you as the reader to pay attention to. Dashes in dialogue. So when we talk about writing with dashes, in general, we're talking about drawing attention to it. It's kind of interrupting the flow of the sentence and making the reader draw their attention to that particular phrase. But when we talk about it in terms of dialogue, it's a little bit different. So dialogue, when you're writing dialogue and you use a dash, it's acting as an actual interrupter. So it's acting as something that actually means the speaker is being cut off. So we'll look at examples of that. A dash in dialogue would look something like this. So Mom says, why didn't you take out the garbage? And Cynthia says, I was trying to, but no excuses. I'm tired of you slacking on chores. So in that kind of dialogue exchange, she is cutting off Cynthia, saying, no excuses. I'm tired of you slacking on chores. And Cynthia says, but I really grounded 4 weeks into discussion. So those little dashes kind of act as you're being interrupted and the dialogue that follows is cutting you off. The last part then is how do we use it? Because now we know what it is. We know that it's basically a longer line, 2 hyphens put together in writing, and a long dash line that your word processor will automatically convert. So if you're writing in Word or Google Docs, if you put the 2 dashes on your keyboard together, it makes the longer line. So now we know what it is. We know what it does. So it's an interrupter pretty much. It can be used as an interruption in between regular writing to kind of draw attention to something, and it can be used in dialogue to interrupt the flow of speech. Now we want to know, how do we use it, right? So in our writing, what do we do to use it correctly when we write? We don't want to have too many interruptions unless you're going to do it for flow, a sort of stylistic choice, and we can look at those at a later time. But for basic skills, let's just talk about, you don't want to do too many dashes just because then it would be overkill, it'd be hard to follow. But they are very useful when we're trying to call attention to something or show interruption in speech. So if we want to call attention to something in our writing, or we want to show an interruption that's happening in dialogue, that is when dashes are useful. So, oh, sorry guys. So what I wanted to say was, we're going to go back to our journals. Well, my last part's fine, but that's okay. So we want to go back to our journals and we want to find a piece of writing that means something to us, something with emotion, and I'm going to do that with you. And we're going to look for a place where we could use a dash to kind of show an interruption or to show something that we want to draw attention to. And it can be a very short piece or it can be a long piece, and we're going to share with each other the excerpts from those pieces that we come up with, that we kind of revise to use a dash with. It only has to be a small part, but I think it would be good for us to try to use some of our own writing and see places where we want to draw attention. Maybe we missed something. Maybe in revision we can go back and see where we could have maybe drawn more attention to a part of a sentence or a phrase or something to add a little more detail to our writing. Okay? And that's it.